Given the enormous scale of the Second World War in Europe, the Spanish Civil War is usually relegated to a small preface event. However, in Spain, with a population of 24 million, it was especially devastating. The war certainly did have an effect on World War II. Hitler now believed expansion into Europe could continue with weak resistance from the West at best. The nationalist victory had weakened the Western democracies. Britain's ability to travel through the Strait of Gibraltar during the war was now threatened. France was now stuck in between two fascist powers, and in broader terms, the Spanish Civil War was, in many ways, a precursor to the much more devastating World War. It is interesting to note that at least one historian, Raymond Carr, has asserted that actually if the Republicans had won, the Mediterranean might have been less secure since Hitler might have invaded it during World War II. The war had also led to some becoming disillusioned with their beliefs. Some socialists and communists, like George Orwell and others, had entered the war believing firmly in their values but were disillusioned by the Stalinist advisors and came to see communism not as the answer to ills of the 20th century. Some pacifists changed their tune as well after the war, feeling that maybe military action was the only way to stop fascism after seeing what had happened in Guernica and elsewhere, and now found themselves supporting a war against Hitler and Mussolini. Historian Piers Brindon calls the Spanish Civil War the hinge between global slump and global war. From a military historian perspective, the war is an interesting crossroads of 20th century warfare. On the one hand, there were still some cavalry charges like that in Tyrol, while air power became key in other places. It was also one of the first wars where bombing of civilian targets from the air was used, something that would become common in World War II. The ground fighting in the Spanish Civil War can be likened to World War I, where defense was the common strategy and advancing required great losses of life. Attack led to counterattack, and so on. In many ways, militarily, the war was a rehearsal for World War II, with some commanders learning how to use new technologies in sync with ground troops effectively. The war also set a precedent in Europe for carpet bombings and targeting civilians with air raids, as well as ideological reprisals and purges of towns after occupation,